And so they settled and changed their behaviors. So we were very glad of that. And she's like LaRose's personal hero. And so we've been connected to her in thought and mind for a very long time.
Okay, just let everybody know I started recording this so that for people who didn't make it, they can join us later. So, should we get going?
Sure, go for it. Brian?
Well, hello. This is our social without the booze, I'm afraid. I think did our bar close? We used to have our social little bar down here, and I think
they have.
Down,
they technically haven't closed, but they're selling.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So tonight we've got Calla Felicity. We're going to have a couple of our candidates on. Calla Felicity's first. She is running for House District 1 against David Rocksmith, who just keeps pissing me off with some of the stuff I read that he's about the environment and things. I just cannot. I thought he was a reasonable person. Somebody had told me once upon a time, but that's long gone, evidently. So. And we're just going to turn this over to Calla to let her introduce herself to anybody who hasn't met her yet, and we'll hit you with questions.
And I'm gonna read my first remarks. My name is Calla Felicity, and I'm running for House District 1 for the position of representative, and I call that a civil servant position because that's how it should be approached. And one of my major objections to the person who is an incumbent is that he doesn't treat that position in that way. But at any rate, House District 1, for those of you who may not know it, encompasses all of Curry County, a very small part of Josephine County, a big chunk of Douglas County geography-wise, but small number, actually I think about 12,000 to 15,000 people in Douglas County, and 12,041 souls in Coos County, which is, we cover the southern, that district includes the southern precincts in Coos County. So we're sending out postcards to folks in Coos and in Curry County, and I understand Josephine County is sending out postcards in Josephine County, and Douglas is sending them in Douglas County, which is great, to let people know which Democrats are on the slate in their area, and urging them to vote from top to bottom or from bottom to top, whichever they prefer, but to vote for Democrats and consider us. I would like to introduce my wife of 32 years, LaRose Dancing Fire Felicity, who is the county chair in Curry County and also the chair of the rural caucus in the state party. I'm also chair of the environmental caucus in the state, at the state level, the Democratic Party of Oregon's environmental caucus, which is a very, very busy caucus. And I'll be glad to talk with you about many things environmental and many things climate crisis oriented. But I first want to tell you a story because it may help you to understand better who I am. I really appreciate that you have invited me to speak with you today, and I recognize that all of your time is valuable, and you spend some of it with me. I really appreciate that. The climate crisis is upon us. With other Oregonians, I've watched in horror as our legislature has been stymied in making any but incremental progress towards addressing resiliency or recovery or response to it. For years before I became an Oregonian, the blockade in the Oregon Senate was caused by a minority of conservative Democrats with funding solidly from fossil fuel, big timber and other extractive industries, and industrial sources. For the past 2 years, fossil fuel corporations, right-wing Republicans, and their allies, identified improperly as timber unity, have continued to thwart the demands of the majority of voters that our legislature establish systems and funding for the transitions Oregonians must make into a clean economy. Most recently and shamefully, in 2019, the House District 1 representative, who was supposed to carry our voices and lift our success, supported the walkout of his partner in shame, unheard from Dallas Hurd, the senator we never heard from in Curry County or saw in person at any time, before COVID-19. I'm speaking without respect of David Brock Smith, who once bragged how well he could work across the aisle, but has shown us instead that he is a bootlicker in the Trump camp, with the prime goal of getting his way, or else destroying our system of governance. His continuing non-representation of District 1 must cease. No more David BS, in or out of the House. He will not serve voters there. He will run away from his job again, rather than engage in the tough conversations that voters entrust representatives to have on our behalf. This is unacceptable. I'm not a person to adverse to tough conversations or finding ways forward through seemingly impossible and even personally disadvantageous government policies. In 1991, when our eldest daughter was born, it was illegal for LaRose and me to be married or to be parents anywhere in the United States. In Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard, in their state legislature, was about to tell the world again that we were members of a class of people who still weren't worthy of equality under the law, that we were people unworthy of parenting, that we were people who could never be married to each other. But people's minds and hearts were beginning to be opened to the reality that every living person in the United States has and should be said to have inalienable rights. Women, people of color, immigrant people, imprisoned people, LGBTQI2SA people, disabled people, veterans, tribal people, unhoused people, working class people, middle class people, and many of us in those distinctive categories belong in several of them. Over time, enough of us got together that we were and are a voting majority, and things that we set in motion began to change. LaRose and I like to joke that we have been married to each other 5 times, because each time something vital was missing. In 1988, we first exchanged vows, which we have kept to this day, and jumped the broom in our own backyard, like our Black ancestors did when it wasn't legal for enslaved people to marry. In July of 1996, we moved from Louisville, Kentucky to San Francisco, so our rights to our children would not be at issue because of our identity. That summer, we domestically partnered under the San Francisco County Ordinance. In September of the same year, the Defense of Marriage Act was signed by Clinton, betraying the Democratic Party promise of inclusion and welcome to the peoples of the Rainbow Coalition. DOMA, the federal so-called Defense of Marriage Act, interfered with what had been a states' right issue and made it impossible for LGBTQIA people who were married in one state to travel to or move to another where their right to be a family was not recognized. Yet 3 years later, in 1999, when California established domestic partnerships statewide, we had another celebration as we signed on for that. And 5 years after that, in February of 2004, on the first day of the Winter of Love, we were married in San Francisco, license and everything, big party, meeting the mayor. The state annulled that marriage the following September. For 4 more years, we could not qualify for a certificate of marriage. Then, for several magical months during 2008, California marriage laws were in flux, and it was okay once again for us to be married. On August 6, 2008, our 20th anniversary, we had a self-planned, all friends and family involved, invited wedding, certificate and everything, registered with the state. Then Proposition 8 was passed, and state laws changed that following November, placing our marriage status in limbo again for 4 more years. Finally, the U.S. Supreme Court decision in 2012 upheld marriages like ours, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg asked the opposition You mean some marriages are real marriages and some marriages are skim milk marriages? The Supreme Court declared at last that ours is a real marriage, not a skim milk marriage. We had known that all along as we advocated for families like ours in ways both personal and political, because it was necessary as survival of a family. Now we're going to back up the clock a bit and go back to when I was actually a fairly young person. In 1970, by the way, I'm 67 if anyone wants to know. In 1972, several years before I came out as a lesbian, I came out as a feminist with the premier principle of the personal is political. I took that to mean that no matter what else I do in my life, there has to be a political component to it, or it will, for me, lack an essential element. In my person, I have lived experience that lends itself to what I think is needed from people of my age who are called to service after leaving the larger world of working for a living. I don't want a career. I've never aspired to one. Like Joe Biden, I am part of the transition generation, a truer description of the work we are called to do than a term of office could be. People of my generation have been waiting for the numbers of younger voters to swell, to step forward with what is needed to succeed in a just transition to a fossil fuel curtailed or free world. To take up and champion the need to demilitarize the internal police forces, to ban assault weapons in private hands as well, to illustrate both personally and politically that Black Lives Matter, period. To assure women equal access to health care and sovereign control of their bodies, to put women in the Constitution, to recognize and uplift tribal peoples among us, and to forge alliances with them, to be certain we honor our veterans and that we stop creating them, to rid ourselves of small-time thinkers and destroyers of alliances that have been crafted over years, so that the progress that people want and support is helped to happen. I will do this job I'm applying for to the very best of my ability if you decide that you want me to work for you. For at most 2 terms. I will be actively seeking and mentoring the next generation of public servant to run for this position between legislative sessions and committee obligations. That is why I'm running. For the House, not away from it. Now, I would be happy to entertain any questions that folks have. So think about it. I'm all yours. Can't say that very much, but I am now. Does anyone have a question? You're welcome. Does anyone have a question?
Well, I actually do, although it certainly doesn't, I mean, it's more of a philosophical question. I just wonder what your thoughts are on how we can proceed after the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in terms of the appointment of a new, I mean, her body's not even cold. Judge, I mean, what are your thoughts about what the Democrats and anybody else, their response should be?
Well, this is a difficult question to answer simply, Linda. I'm going to start out with saying something that sounds tangential, and I hope I get back to the main point. We're dealing right now in on the national level with 2 kinds of politics. We have politics on what I would say is our side, although we are not a sporting team. We have politics among the Democrats, which have stretched to become, Now I say stretched, you heard my personal journey in one segment of civil rights. But those of you who are my age and those of you who read history understand that this struggle has not been minor, short, or in any way assisted by the Republicans in governance since Nixon. So this is a very long time of civil rights advancing despite Republican interference with them. And one of the things that the Democrats did was we changed our party. I've been a Democrat my whole life, and I was a Democrat because I believe in civil rights so strongly. And where civil rights was at that time was first the movement for Black civil rights and women's civil rights joined hands, and both sets of civil rights moved forward with a stronger alliance than before. We also enlisted, feminists enlisted the help of our male counterparts in government and in organizations to join us in that struggle. And we also moved forward with LGBTQIA rights similarly, but at the last of the long arc of the rights movement. But what happened was Democrats were stretching our House. We were making the House bigger to include those of us, and I'm going to use a word that you can talk to me about if you want to, but to include those of us who are on the left, those of us who are liberal, those of us who are progressive, which I am. I'm a progressive Democrat. But the House at first didn't include us, and we insisted that it do that. Now, to arc back around to what to do about an appointment of a federal judge, it's been my experience that we are more and more dealing with a reality of governance, a reality of how government works, a reality of how we can change how government works if we want to, reality of how votes count, and that's all that we've been talking about. That's how we talk. Then there's the other thing, and that's an alternate reality. So how we deal as thinking, caring citizens with a group of citizens who appear to be inhabiting an alternate reality, using alternative facts, using alternative science, using alternative legal argument to win cases or to win their way, to take their way, when actually what they're doing is blockading government and destroying it. That's two things that are happening. So they're blockading any movement through the Senate, and the Senate Democrats, for all their good intentions, have not been successful in countering that blockade. I can't say why because I don't serve in that body, but we could have wild speculation at this point why the Democrats have not accomplished this. That we have a minority versus a majority is what we keep hearing, but why we haven't done better, I don't know. I think that we have a situation among the Republicans where we have people that are totally bought and bossed. And when that is an alternate reality. How does someone operate in a political reality, political sense, if they've been bought? How do they act? Well, we know how they act. We see it. The amount of money that is in fossil fuel is unimaginable. You cannot imagine it. And fossil fuel right now is governing our country. And so as long as that's the case, everything devolves on the climate crisis and our response to it, because we have to rein them in on every front. The climate crisis is the worst reason we have to rein them in, but their control of government is. Am I going to be talking theories here? No, I'm not. Am I going to be talking, they're hiding the ball and they're doing these big things to do this? No, I'm not. It's very clear. If you follow the money, you'll find that at the base of it are fossil fuel companies. And they're not just fossil fuel corporations in our country. They're also run by an organization that sometimes still calls itself OPEC. And they're also run by something that we refer to as oligarchs, which this is like the extremely filthy, the word is right, filthy rich, whose purpose in life is to acquire power and more power. I'm not sure what motivates them. So here we have Ruth Bader Ginsburg holding the line on the civil rights front very effectively in the court, and she dies. And now we have a situation where Congress is once again going to be controlled by Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is possibly the most evil person I've ever observed in government. And I thought his predecessor was pretty bad. Dick Cheney was really awful. He's the last real big hooligan that ran our government. But Mitch McConnell was running our government. Donald Trump is a destructive, powerful, destructive dictator at this point. And what I'm hoping the Democrats are going to do is impeach him again. So on a national front, I think that would be the best strategy is impeach him now. He has many other crimes with which he's not been charged that he did. He will not be, he won't be found guilty by the Senate, but it might use up some time, you know, might use up some time. So, but what happens, what the Republicans are counting on is a discombobulated, worried, afraid opposition in the Democrats. So from our side, I would say what we need to do on the federal level as well as on the local level is not be those things. Don't be confused. Don't be afraid, and don't be worried. Of course, we're all worried, but on a real sense, don't be worried. We're going to try to reinstate government. That's what Joe Biden's purpose is, reinstating government. And if he's successful at that, he will have done, will have undone deliberate destruction of government that began in a really obscene way under Reagan. So I don't really know what to do about the Supreme Court, but there are several strategies that are being discussed. And we as the frontline Democrats down here in the boonies, we don't know what's going to be done by the federal boys, the federal gang. We don't really know what they're going to come up with. They are talking about impeachment. I would certainly welcome that effort from them, but I also know that those individuals are thinking about holding the line in the jobs that they currently hold and electing other Democrats to help them do the things that need to be done to rebuild the government. I'm not a big government person at heart, actually, but we have a big country. It's very complicated, and we need administration to run it, just as the fact of the matter. We, in fact, don't want libertarians to, we don't want to depend on the ethics of the local libertarians to not have a government locally. So I'm not sure what the Democrats are going to do. It's conjectures out there. But on a local level, it's very important that people consider that although we consider that we are a blue state, we're a blue state largely through the efforts of the cities, the large cities. And those of us out in more red areas, we understand that energizing the progressive grid is not a short-term effort. It's not easy, and it's not always going to be successful, whatever strategies we try. And those of us who are in my age group, my age bracket, we will have only a limited number of years to keep at this work. So I'm sorry I don't have an easy answer for you there about what I really think about it. It's kind of all over the map. I'm certainly hopeful that the federal electeds will gather that they have some political traction to use against this really evil person, Mitch McConnell. I certainly hope they get some traction against him in this instance, but I don't know. And we have other options that we could do on the other side. We could also consider a constitutional amendment and make the Supreme Court bigger. We could consider a constitutional amendment and limit terms. And that would be, both of those are things that I think are a good thing to do. I think that having 9 justices to, at this point, decide all the cases that go up the Supreme Court, a great number of cases. I think that that's kind of a lot of work for them. I'm not really interested in having someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg have to die in order for there to be a new justice appointed. She should have been able to retire and take care of her illness. Don't you think so? What do you think, Linda? What do you think is going to happen? Wait, unmute.
Well, here's Dorothy. I don't think her timing was planned out very well. She was trying to make it to Hillary Clinton, and best laid plans of mice and men and women and children. We did receive a question via email, which I think it's from a person who isn't here. Connie Hunter, does that ring a bell to you?
Connie Hunter is a member of the community in, I know Connie personally, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so she asked a question of why didn't you insist on equity, diversity, and inclusion policy while volunteering at KCIW, and the same thing of ethical fundraising standards?
I didn't have those functions when I was working at KCIW. I was a volunteer. Okay. And what I did was sound. So I edited sound. I recorded things in the studio and edited sound. I didn't have any of those functions. And Connie Hunter has a long-running battle against KCIW, which is our local public radio station, attempting to take them off the table for whatever reason, I don't know. But she's been fighting that battle since practically I got to Brookings, and I never took part in it.
Okay, all right. All right, so I got that question in. Anyone else? I believe Kat has joined us as
Hi,
well.
Kat. Hi, Kat, good to see you. Well, I don't know if any of you, do all of you do social media or some of you not do it? Yeah, everybody does social media?
I do it.
Well, we're having a signage war over here. War is too big a word. We're having a signage challenge in Brookings and Harbor and Curry County in general that recently had a shot across the bow, if you will, from the Trump camp. They put up a billboard-sized sign on Highway 101 without a permit. Now, Highway 101 is a federal highway which allows no billboards. Okay, so there we are with this huge Trump. It says Trump 2020. It's a big hand-painted billboard sign right there on the Chetco River Bridge, which is the southern end of Brookings as we leave the town. And we're getting, it just happened, they just put it up this weekend. So we're getting hundreds of calls, literally. This is a lot of Democrats, not really hundreds, probably tens. We're a small town. But we're getting so many calls from Democrats and concerned allies talking about that terrible sign on the bridge. So LaRose created a sign for me that's like a huge sign. It's 4x7, which is big for us. And we put that up and then took pictures of us at the sign, and you can see the sign before you get to the Trump sign. So it's kind of like, well, don't look at that one, look at this one, right? And we put an American flag on our sign because we figured either it's gonna protect it from vandalism or else they're gonna take the flag down right away, but they haven't yet so far. So once some wig put lies at the bottom of the Trump sign, Trump 2020 lies, and then somebody took that down. But ODOT apparently has made a ruling on it, and they have to take it down, and they can't put it back up without a permit because of its size. Now they could put up a smaller sign if they were willing, but that's the signage. And so we're doing signage dominance. We're doing signage. We said we're going to be dominant in the signage game. We have an offer from our chair that for $100, she will paint you a personal sign of the sizes that we have available, which are anything from 4x4 to, I think the biggest piece that we have is like 9x16. So that's final. And come and hang it at your place or wherever you have a place for it. If you want to donate $100, and now we're down to, if you want to donate the money for the signage material itself, which is about $40 for the wood and the paint, then we'll make the sign and put it up at your place. So we have Trump signs in town, and we are starting to see Biden Harris signs all over the county, and we have sold out twice of our Biden Harris signs. Are y'all experiencing that over there at Josephine?
We certainly are. As a matter of fact, we just ordered another 100 today.
And I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I mean, did you all get the story before that? It's not a story, it's how people feel. That they were afraid to put up a sign?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. So they're not so afraid. We kept telling them that if you're the only person on your block, go meet your neighbors. We can give you a list of who on your block is actually Democrat. Go meet your neighbors. Your PCP will greatly appreciate it. And you'll find out. Maybe 4 of you will put up signs. Wouldn't that be something?
How many do we have? How many have we sold there, Dorothy? 400?
Well, probably about 300.
My word, that's fabulous.
Yeah, maybe I'll look it up to see how many times. This is our 4th order.
That's amazing.
Signs. Yeah, it really is. And I took a drive around Grants Pass today, and I saw Biden signs, and I did not see one Trump sign.
Wow.
Now, there's plenty of Trump
amazing.
signs out where I live, which is your district. But, But actually,
Yeah.
we've got a huge, two huge Biden-Harris signs that a winery that's on riverbanks over here put up well within their, behind their fences so that nobody can get at it.
That's amazing. And there's some stalwart people, because in our city, the rumor was that if you put, I don't know if it's a rumor or if somebody actually experienced this, but this was from leftover from 2016. And during the Obama years, the racism here was, it was just as thick as a fog. So there was the feeling that if you put something on your car, your car would be damaged. And of course, I don't know about you guys, but my car is my billboard, right? So it's got signage for my campaign and for Biden's campaign and for Merkley's campaign and for DeFazio's campaign and for Kat's campaign. We got all that on my car. And every time I drive it out, I think, I have good insurance. And, but there's a little car driving around town facing down these huge trucks that have got these big, huge Trump flags on them that just roar through town and get on the horn. So there's this little car that's a silver car. I noticed it today. They have Trump pence. They have not Trump pence. They have Biden-Harris signs all over their car. And they have a big sign on the side that says Catholic. I don't know if that's to save their car. And they have flags on every window. So they're like ready for the, we're going to do a parade to the ballot box every night starting October 14th. So that we have, we honk a few horns, not big ones like the big trucks. That's obnoxious. But put some flags and some bunting and some signs and some Sousa marches and just drive the heck around our, I don't know, 8 square miles of town and tell folks, let's take it to the ballot box. We're advising folks, don't vote by mail. We're advising folks, vote in the box.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing. I think Christian has a question that came up in chat. Do you want to unmute yourself, Christian?
Sure. I had a question for Calla on what is your goals or plans on green banks and state banks.
Oh, you want to hear about green banks? Yes, I haven't talked about that. As part of our recent resolution into the state party, which is the way that you get new material into the founding documents, the guiding documents of the party, we proposed a resolution, and one of the things that we're proposing in answer to, in part of the transition process for the Oregon Green New Deal, we're proposing that the legislature consider the creation of green banks. Green banks, we're calling them green banks. Green banks would be state or local banks, not credit unions, of which you have to be a member. State or local banks that would do several things, but 3 main things. One of the things that they would do, which is kind of a side issue, is they would, we think that their administration of federal funds, which will be coming to Oregon at some point, we're assuming that we're going to win the federal election. We really need to do that. And if that's the case, then the Green New Deal in the federal level will send funds to the states to help us with our infrastructure, such as the terrible water system in Port Orford, or the almost as terrible water system in our area, not Brookings, but in the city that's just south of us, Harbor. And the water and sewer systems in a lot of our cities are terribly disintegrated. So when we think of infrastructure, we think about those things. We think about our bays and our harbors on the coast. Inland, we think about tunnels and culvert work and bypass of river work, all kinds of work that can be done to rebuild infrastructures, including communication systems, by the way. But in order to accomplish that, the federal banks are controlled by a federal banking system that doesn't really lend itself to that kind of on-the-ground work. The second use of the green banks would be to furnish microloans and small loans specifically for businesses that are green from get to go. In counties, now Grants Pass is a big city for us. Actually, it's a big city, period, for considering for Curry County, but that's not in our district. Our district is generally, CAT has some of the larger population centers, but in HD1, we qualify as rural, no matter what we call our cities, because we have like 27,000 people approximately in our whole county. And the part of Coos County that we're representing is about the same population, about 27,000, 23 something thousand people. That's not voters, that's people. And the part of Douglas County also. So that's how the thing is broken out. It's clumps of people that are spread apart in small places. And people that need to start businesses quite often can't borrow enough to do that. In other words, they don't qualify for a loan of the size they need because the size they need is too small. This is a weird thing that happens with federal banking systems, is that their rules on lending, mostly written to protect consumers, but written after consumers were already harmed. So they're not very well written laws to cause banks to serve the public. They're basically meant to restrict the banks from bad behavior. Those are not necessarily the same thing. So green banks would be able to do something, we would hope that the state would design them this way, would be able to offer microloans, which are loans that are under $5,000. Small businesses, very small businesses, often don't need a huge influx of cash to get their business off and running. They actually need to buy a specific thing, like a certain piece of equipment or a new tractor or something else that is a specific amount of money that one employee's benefits for the year, something that they can envision that they need to do. We're talking about small manufacturers and small businesses and agribusinesses, is too many businesses there, and fishing businesses and businesses along those lines that employ from 1 to 20 people. That's the maximum amount that are really suitable for our areas. Businesses that employ, like the mills do, 150 people, we really are not suited for businesses of that size because we don't have the land for it, we don't have the resources to support it, and we don't have the customers for what it would make. So in order for the small businesses to flourish, to come back from the COVID recession, and the recession that's going to worsen, you all know that the recession is not going to get suddenly better under President Biden. They're going to have to work really hard to turn that around. And if we do get it turned around in 8 years, he's only going to serve the first 4. That's his promise. So we'll have to find someone else to continue crafting that. But meanwhile, the third thing that green banks might do is help the burgeoning industry, which is the cannabis industry. We are expecting the federal government under Biden to decriminalize marijuana. We hope that happens because it means that a great many businesses, small businesses, and a fairly large section of our economy locally in this district will be able to come above board. Currently, they have to do all of their business by cash. And although that seems like a really fun thing to do, it's not of much benefit to business. I've been a small business person, and if I had to do everything in cash, I would have actually gone crazy trying to figure, and I don't know how they do taxes, or if they do, I don't know what they're doing to see that their employees earn a fair wage and are not paid in product. There are things that need to happen to bring the marijuana industry into a good business relationship with the rest of the businesses. We know it's going to be here a long time. We have in Oregon also, we have small breweries and wine growers and winemakers. All of these folks would have been out of business in the early 20s. You remember that. Prohibition came in, they'd have been out of work. And they were actually illegal businesses at one point, and they're still very highly regulated. And the marijuana industry, from growers to sellers, the kinds of regulations that exist are still piecemeal and patchwork and sort of amalgamated because they're not based on a real business, on a business model where a person could say, own a marijuana business and then buy a house because you could get a loan from a bank, because you can't buy a house from a bank unless you can show on paper that you have money. And if you show on paper that you have money, you might be subject to federal prosecution. So it's a very hard thing to consider. I'm going to be talking, I hope that Kat and I are going to be talking to some marijuana industry people this weekend. We've invited them because we'd like to hear what they have to say about how the current regulations are actually working or not working for them. and what their feelings are about moving more into a steady relationship with the rest of the business community, which green banks could do now. And green banks could do it no matter what the feds do. It could recognize small business at that level. It could recognize the psilocybin measure that's on the that is on our plates this time around in our ballots. The psilocybin is also a federally regulated drug, so a substance. So how the feds are going to take Oregon once again stepping out in the forefront, I'm not sure. But we're not interested in having the marijuana industry taken over by huge monetary interests and governed from outside the state the way the timber industry currently is. So green banks would allow us to have state and local control. And I think that that's called for. Big banks have behaved very badly under Obama. They behaved very badly at the turn of the century. This is twice in 20 years that they've behaved very badly. And we need to have more control over our banks, we think, in the environmental community. So we hope that we could establish banks whose purpose, they would also be able to, I'm sorry, this is the other leg. We need to have some control over local bond measures, which we don't currently have good control over local bond measures and how they're administered. We'd like them to be administered from somebody who is vested in the community that they exist in. They're not in a community because a national corporation stuck them there in a regional office. We'd like banks to be responsible and reporting to the communities that they serve. Did that answer you, Christian, or is there another thing that you want to hear about?
Yes, that answered my question. Thank you.
Perhaps
Thank
we
you
should,
very-
go
Oops.
ahead.
Thank you very much, Calla. Did you have another question there, Dorothy? Or
No, I was gonna kind of move it on to Kat.
yeah,
But-
right. Okay, Calla, send some stuff our way, some swag, okay? And we've also have Kat Stone here. Kat Stone is running for Senate District 1, which is half of Calla's district and some more. And she's got a real winner she's running against. He's another guy that just, I can't believe the stuff he sends out, and how do these people get elected? That's amazing. Anyway, welcome, Kat Stone.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm down at the Democratic office in Douglas County tonight, so I have a camera and everything, so I can really talk to everybody. Usually if I'm trying to run my camera, it freezes the whole thing, so I'm using Betsy's. How did Dallas get elected? Well, he's got a rich daddy, and he's big in the Republican Party. His daddy's on the executive board. And he can't do much of anything else. He's really a not very bright kid. He was totally homeschooled. And there was a reason for that. I'll say that. There was a reason for that. So Dallas might be a nice guy, but he really doesn't have a clue. He doesn't know anything about what really makes the world tick. And I do. I have been studying with several economists for the last 3-4 years about what happened in the 90s and how we ended up so impoverished. And what happened in the 90s was that you should know that there's a harvest severance tax on every tree that is cut in California. It's 3.5%. In Idaho, it's 3.5%. In Washington, it's 5%. In Washington, they have an 80% rule. That means 80% of the money goes back to the counties where the trees came from. In the 1990s, Oregon had a 6% harvest severance tax. And when they started talking about the spotted owl actually only impacted the monies that came back to counties less than 25% of what they used to get, because the rest of the money came from private timber. Private timber paid the harvest severance tax and they paid property tax, a very realistic property tax. So private timber is supposed to pay property tax and income tax. And during the 90s, the Democrats in the north of this county, of this state, decided to get together with the timber industry. And you remember we had Kitzhaber. Kitzhaber was from Douglas County. He worked at our community hospital before he went to be governor. And so he sat down and they created this plan to take away the property tax value, and that was reduced 90%. Have the citizens ever gotten a 90% cut in their property taxes? No. In fact, because private timber doesn't pay those property taxes anymore, our fees and our taxes go up. They also got a pretty much 99.9% cut in their harvest severance tax. How is the harvest severance tax calculated now that it's not 6%? Well, the Oregon Forest Research Institute sets the tax every year. Oregon Forest Research Institute is the PR arm of private timber. So they set, this last year, they set the amount of money that they would need for private timber to pay was $4 million. And with that $4 million, they produce commercials and propaganda to teach you how good logging is for your health and your water and for life, for wildlife. Those kind of commercials are all produced with money that used to come back to communities. And that's what we need to do. We need to reinstate harvest severance. And it might have to look a little different. It might look like a license instead of a tax, and different levels, depending on how much acreage you own. But the other thing that has changed dramatically is that the timber industry, you used to have family industries and they had mills and they owned land, they cut the logs, they bought from the BLM and they bought from the Forest Service. But now we have, you remember Georgia Pacific and Plum Creek and Weyerhaeuser? Well, Weyerhaeuser ended up buying Plum Creek and Georgia Pacific, and they formed a new type of corporation, and it's called a Timber Industry Management Organization, or a real estate investment trust. And the way these corporations are structured is that as long as they pay out 90% of their profit every year to their stockholders, they don't pay federal income tax, and Oregon follows the federal tax rulings. So they don't pay state income tax on those profits either. So this money is owned by foreigners. Like this land is owned by foreigners. And I want to show you my prop. Can you see it? So all of the red there is the Western ownership of forest land. And all of the red is TIMOs and REITs. And they don't provide jobs. They don't have employees. What they do is, as a corporation, a TIMO, the board of directors decides that we're going to cut so many acres, and you're going to find a guy with a feller buncher, and you're going to use him as a contractor, and then the feller buncher guy is going to find the log truck drivers. And how long does it take to clear a hillside now with a feller buncher? 3 or 4 days. And the log trucks haul them out, and those log truck drivers get to drive for 3 or 4 days. There are no jobs created. There's no real income created. And we need to get a handle on how we're letting the corporations run the show. They have more rights than we do. We really need to make Oregon for Oregonians. We should maybe not have any foreign ownership, is what I was told by one of the economists. Oregon could be like Mexico, and you can't own land along the beach. anywhere in Mexico. Well, let's just make it so that the lands that used to be ours, because all of those red areas used to be public land, and they were given away by the state to settlers to settle. And the settlers ended up selling out to the timber industry, and they bought them up and then they sat on them. So they're not doing anything for us anymore. We're like Africa. We're like Africa, where these people came in and took our lands, and now they give us jobs to dig up the diamonds. And we don't get any of the profit from it, but it's our land. It's our land. It's not really theirs. So it would be good if we could just get rid of foreign ownership. And that's kind of how I feel. Now, does anybody have any questions?
How do you think this connects with our fire danger right now?
Plantations are what is on those industrial lands. Plantations, you can see what they look like underneath when you drive along the freeway now, and they've cut back that 30-foot easement or whatever for ODOT. They've cut it back so far that you can see what a plantation looks like underneath. And it's just dry twigs and little sticks. They used to talk about how they planted, we have more trees growing out here than before we started logging. And it's just stupid, because if you plant that many trees that close together, they're not going to get to any diameter. And they're just dry. They are completely dry. Things that people don't know about Douglas fir is that Douglas fir have a life cycle. And for the first 80 years, their siphon is open and they suck water up constantly. Redwoods do that too, but they only grow on the coast. But here we have Douglas firs, and every new plantation is just going to suck the water out of the ground and keep it from running into the stream. And that's how we end up with such low flows in the summer now. I have lived here 65 years and I have never seen it so low. And there are actually studies done that show that next to a clear cut that has been replaced with a plantation, the water flows come up for a first couple of years because there isn't anything to hold it. But shortly after those little trees start to mature, then the summer flows go down. So it's really a dry landscape out there, and they aren't doing anything for us. If we could take them back over, we should do something like pre-thinning, where we get in there and we cut some of those sticks out and we give those trees room to grow bigger, have a better diameter. Every year they're in the ground, every 5 years that they're in the ground, they're worth more. So it isn't financially really a good thing for us. I don't know if you know that the TIMOs and REITs are now on 20-year rotations, that they're going out there and they're cutting them because they really aren't growing very well.
Mm-hmm.
So Kat, can you explain the difference between a small timber owner, say less than 100 acres, and the larger timber owners in regards to the taxes they pay, the property taxes and the severance taxes?
So in Oregon, you can, if you have under 5,000 acres, it's 5,000 acres that is considered a small woodlot owner. And you use your severance tax, if you wish to offset your property tax. And let me tell you, it's complicated. It's really complicated. In California, Idaho, and Washington, it is not complicated. You can go right on the state website and type in severance tax, timber severance, and it tells you right there exactly how it's broken down, and you can't even find it on Oregon's website anywhere. That didn't answer your question, I bet.
Kat,
Yeah.
could you talk a little bit about the role of Coast Range forests in carbon sequestration, and the environmental impact of that in terms of mitigating climate change?
Well, absolutely. The Coast Range of the Pacific Northwest is the best carbon sequestration in the world, better than the Amazon. Our trees grow really well where they grow, and they grow really big. And after a tree gets to be 80 years old, after a Douglas fir gets to be 80 years old, it starts to release water into the air, which makes it cooler. And this is how we can do a huge part to combat climate change, is to keep our primordial forests, keep them in the ground, keep them growing. As the trees get older, they put on weight, they become more dense, and they absorb more carbon. We need to keep them in the ground. That isn't really part of the carbon sequestration policy, because carbon sequestration assumes that in the future you will log the trees. And I don't find that I agree with that. I don't think that that's a good model. And I think that we could do better. Yes, Calla?
And so you all know, what Kat just said about carbon sequestration, the Environmental Caucus of the Democratic Party is not going to support cap and trade, because the resistance from the right is so thorough that an omnibus plan, as was proposed and was defeated at the last legislative session by the massive walkout of both houses of Congress in both houses legislatures in our state government, defeated it so thoroughly that even as well laid as that plan was, we can't see that it's going to move forward, and it's using up all of our climate crisis capital. So we are supporting, and Kat and I have talked about this, the Environmental Caucus supports small, slim, fast bills. Those are the kinds of bills that address specific issues instead of huge, massive change issues like the carbon cap and trade tried to do. In our county and in our districts, Kat's and mine, the things that were left on the table by our legislators that were specifically of benefit to those of us along the southern corridor of Oregon, where the highways begin, which was a big set off for many years, 8 years to come into compliance with increased prices of fuel, which is one way to drive the use of fuel down, is to increase the tax burden on fuel, just like the tax burden on tobacco dramatically drove the use of tobacco down. So that's one of the tools in the tool chest that could be used. But when you talk about cap and trade, understand that a great deal of carbon sequestration money has already been spent, but not to Oregon's benefit. At this point, as Kat was talking about, it cost Oregon more to harvest timber than it returns to the state. A huge difference. They take more out of our economy than they contribute. It's a big misbalance. Thanks, Kat, for addressing this.
Well, thank you, Calla.
So when you talk about streamlined bills going through the legislature, I know that most of the environmental caucus has been focused on state lands, which is understandable because I don't think we have a lot of control over the feds. But how is it that states like Washington and California can prohibit clear cutting on private and federal and state lands? How does that happen? And can it happen here?
Yes, it can. If the state has a stronger interest than any action that any citizen anticipates, then the state can proceed with that behavior on the part of the state. I don't know. I'd have to look and see what Washington did. Maybe Kat knows. But
Oh,
the amount of obfuscation and mirrors and redirecting of the liquid through the pipeline that the timber companies have done is one of the things that they've affected is they've effectively prevented good solar practice here in Oregon. We have some huge solar farms. We have no community solar still. And we're years behind that. We're years behind the states around us in getting that established, both for resiliency it's needed and for actual energy consumption it's needed in Oregon. And we could have done what the states around us have done years back, like the states around us did years back. But the fossil fuel corporations are so powerful that they prevented this. And they've controlled the timber industry for a long time, as Kat says. And so they are experts at low road capitalism. They've been practicing low road capitalism. They've been practicing that kind of capitalism in all of the Gulf Coast states for almost 200 years now. So they're very good at it. And we're being taken down the road. Low road capitalism is at play here. They come take the pipeline. Nobody's asked me about the pipeline, but the pipeline does affect all of us. And I'm solidly against it. I'm pretty sure Kat's solidly against it because it is another low road capitalism venture. Our opposite numbers are totally for it, by the way, because they say it'll create jobs. It will not create jobs. So anyway, so that was my little take on that subject.
thank you, Calla.
Hey, Kat.
Yes, Brian.
I was wondering if you ever put Dallas's comment to use where he said he didn't care if he got reelected or not.
We do have it on the website, I believe. We haven't really concentrated on it. Kind of the team is thinking about timing, when it's going to make a best impact. We got a lot of blowback when we did the thing about him sleeping again. We called him Sleepy Dallas, and we got bad comments because, you know, Trump uses Sleepy Joe. So because Dallas actually sleeps on the job, and because he wasn't able to read the entire bill that he was supposed to vote on, so he voted against something that seemed like a good idea. But because he didn't have time to read it, he was too rushed and he was too tired to care. He was too tired to care. We got in trouble for that. So are we going to run a really mean campaign? Maybe in the last weeks.
I have a question for Kat.
Hi, Kathy, go ahead.
Hi. You know, you mentioned that the government, the state government can do something about private land, people who clear cut that. We have, when I go visit my sister in Cave Junction, I get so mad. On the left, going there, someone has clear cut that whole mountainside, and there's no way any other trees will ever grow there again, and it looks like it can erode just with the first big rainstorm. Now, why can't something, even though that possibly or probably is private land, that's land that's going to affect when it starts eroding and the dirt starts going down the hill, it's going to get in streams there. Why can't the government say something about that one?
Well, according to the timber industry, clear cuts don't cause landslides. And that's not true. It's patently not true. I had a friend from Mercy Hospital who was killed, and her 2 children barely escaped, but 2 other people were killed in a landslide from a clear cut above their cabin upstream. It's absolutely true, and they absolutely lie. But the problem is that we have what's called the Commerce Clause in the Constitution that says that a corporation, because it is a corporation, is smarter and more powerful than the regular citizens. Once we give them superpowers as corporations, they have the right to harm us because we cannot stand in the way of their production of money. And that is something that we need to change. It's like one of those big constitutional amendments that we also need to reverse Citizens United, which the corporations are part of that as well. So corporations, when we give them superhumanness, they owe the citizens something, and they should be paying taxes, and they should be providing jobs, and they should be contributing to the health of the community, even if it's just creating educational opportunities for the children of the workers. So when we gave corporations superpowers to hurt us, that was really bad, and we really need to fix it. And I really want to find out how we can do that. I'm working with Community Rights Douglas County and Community Rights Lane County, Community Rights Lincoln County, and we're really going to court and trying to figure out how we can give the citizens their right to health and wealth and bounty back.
And I want to say something about Kat and me both, because you know we're kind of focusing in these conversations on some of the issues that are facing us, some of the challenges that are facing us. But take an opportunity to talk to Kat about other things when we're out of this meeting, because she's also got a very good grasp on the challenges that are facing us, and they are multitudinous. I mean to tell you, they're not insurmountable when we take them one at a time. But if we try to take on every one of them at once, it's pretty mind-boggling, because people that are intent on destroying the government have done a really good job, and we have to stop it. So, you know, the strategies to do that, we'll be talking with other folks who are also policy wonks, and we'll be talking about strategies, because the thing about continuing to talk about the history and the so forth that we know about, the scientific support for the response to climate crisis, the response to COVID-19, the scientific information about COVID-19. We have an alternate reality bunch that don't believe science exists. So how to have a conversation among citizenry that includes us and them is challenging. So strategies to surmount that inability to get the populace moving forward with a conviction that this is a strategy that we agree to try for. We agree on this goal, this is a strategy we'll try, and then change the strategy if it's not working. It's very difficult in policy matters to make that kind of shift and change once you get going down a really bad pathway. And that's what fossil fuel has done to this state in all kinds of ways. The timber industry is the largest industry that it's operated on, but it's operated in that manner in several other smaller industries in the state. So how to find all the plugs in the water pipelines, how to find all the broken connections in the grid, we are really going to be looking at those things. And we have some good experts who've been looking at them for a while.
And that's the thing, we have to work with experts. And
Right.
like, I have my 4 economists, but they have 4 more people who worked in the forest industry, who have a whole background in biology and chemistry, and they know stuff. So we're as good as our team. That's what we are.
Right.
Calla and I are sharing our teams, and we have a goal and a destination, and it isn't just us. It's everybody who cares has to pitch in and has to reach out. The network has to grow, and there are a lot of people out there. And if you ever get a chance to just talk to Calla, my brain gets bigger every time I get to sit down and have a conversation with her. So it's really a synchronicity and a network, and reaching out and being willing to put ourselves out there, being willing to be the ones to go to Salem and to speak and to talk about what are the things that need to change. You guys in Northern Oregon don't know what it's like for us in rural counties. You don't understand that a gun is as much a tool as a shovel when you live next to the forest in the wildland urban interface. You don't understand up there what it's like when you have to drive so far to get to work. You guys may have a commute, but it's 5 or 6 miles in 6 hours. But for us, it's a long ways between getting from your home to healthcare. If you even have insurance, if you even have doctors in your community. And we used to have small hospitals in our communities, but now everything is with the mega corporations, the huge hospitals. They all got in together. And we just really have to get back to not living globally, not so much global. Global isn't working for Oregon, not for Southern Oregon. They're shipping our logs overseas, and the supply chain sucks in the winter when we had Snowmageddon and the trucks with the groceries couldn't get through. We need to be more reliant on ourselves, and that is what the true Oregon spirit has always been. We're independent, and we know how to take care of ourselves. So we need to really impress Portland with that we have manners too, but you have to think about us. And we might have to get loud, and we might have to get annoying. I'm good at that.
Me too.
My commissioners hate me because I'm there every week. Well, they just quit having meetings so that I can't campaign from the Board of Commissioners conference room. So I'm there every week. I'm asking the hard questions. If people want to know, why did the commissioners do this, or why did they do that? I'm there to ask that question on video, but then they quit doing the videos, so I had to start recording it myself. So you can go to my YouTube channel and check out what my county commissioners have been up to, if you care. But the thing is that I am known to be a government watchdog, and I'm not always right when I question something, but I'm questioning it because somebody wants to know, or because I don't understand what you just did. And I'm not afraid to do that. And Calla's not afraid to do that. And I think you definitely should vote for us.
We will.
Thank you.
I think you guys would be a great pair to represent us down here in Southwest Oregon. That's for sure.
We got to make noise from down here because we're screaming in the wilderness. And we're far, far away. You can't get there from here. You know, Brookings is amazing, but why do we have to leave the state of Oregon to get there? I mean, if you don't take Highway 42, if you take 199, you got to go to California to get to Brookings. Brookings was rated the #1 place in the country about 8 years ago for all the amenities and climate. They were the top place in the world for people that would want to move there, but it's really hard to get there.
If you want the answer to that sometime, Kat, you should get me going about the history of roads and transportation in Southwestern Oregon. There are actual reasons why you have to leave the state to get to Brookings. I'd be glad to fill you in.
Well, I hope you're going to be doing your podcasts pretty soon.
Well,
Yeah,
you do know that there's a move to move Brookings to Idaho. You know that, right? It would be even harder to get to Idaho.
I think those people are already in their own private Idaho, their own privatized Idaho.
I can tell you that if the southern counties and the eastern counties get raked into Idaho, they will have much, much bigger buffers on their streams, and they will have a 3.5% severance tax. Idaho citizens pay about $1,000 less in taxes per year than Oregon does. And that is directly a cause of the loss of harvest severance, because they do have a sales tax there as well. So the southern counties will have a sales tax. That will be on the ballot in all of the southern counties. I don't know if it's in our county. It's supposed to be a poll. It's going to be on the ballot, but it isn't really a measure. It's just a poll to see whether the commissioners are doing what the citizens want. How many citizens want to be part of Idaho, and how many citizens would vote against that? so that they know what to do with their executive orders.
Well, there's always a move afoot in our neck of the woods that everybody just secede, period. Anyway, so there's always that run through the militia. And Kat and I agree on some things and disagree on other things. So we're kind of a good example of how allies can work together on goals. We might have the same goal, have different strategies. That's what we expected of Republicans. Only
Yep.
they're not doing that. So they just alternate reality. And the only thing I can figure is to clean them out. And then we're such a big tent of Democrats. There'll be some of us who are conservative on this, that, or the other issue, and some of us who are not. And there'll be those in the middle. So who knows what's going to happen. We hope that the non-affiliated voters, enough of them are woke, that they understand that the climate crisis is the central issue of our times. And if the countdown of 7 years didn't impinge on anybody's heads in Times Square, we've already wasted 3 of those years. And I really saw it happening because I moved right before the 2016 debacle. I moved to Oregon to retire because it's the kind of place that I wanted to live in when I retired. I did not want to live in San Francisco. I lived in small towns and country before, and I want to live in small towns and country. And so the issues that are challenges that happen here, they happen in small town and country everywhere in the country, in the whole United States. We have slightly different ones, but the issues and challenges are very similar, and how we approach them are very similar. So our society means a lot to us in small towns and rural areas. Our neighbors mean a lot to us, and for our neighbors just to be acting like crazy people just doesn't make sense. So we hope that this long nightmare will be over on the national front, which will make our local issues much more handleable.
I have a somewhat interesting question. One of the things that goes on in Josephine County is we have a property tax that is absolutely ridiculously low. It doesn't pay for anything. It's 58 cents per assessed thousand. There is at one time, a couple of years ago, there was actually a bill floating through Salem about having a mandatory minimum property tax. What do you think about that? Did you know anything about it?
I know a little. I know that Douglas County pays the third lowest, and that's $1.11 per thousand. I do live in an area where I hear all the time from my Republican counterparts that taxation is theft. And I tell them, no, taxation is community. Taxation is community. If your community wants to build a swimming pool, as Winston did for at least 200 years, you have to agree that the community is going to pitch in and everybody is going to help build the swimming pool for the good of the community. And I think that a basic minimum tax is certainly not a bad idea, because if you leave it to a lot of people, you've got older people who don't have kids in school, so they don't want to vote for a property tax to improve the school or build a new school. And you've got just people who don't have children at all that don't want to pay for a school. And pretty soon that just drags your community down. So a basic minimum tax is extremely sensible. I don't know how you go about doing that, but we did have Measure 50 that put the limit on how high your taxes could be raised. And that was the start of the downhill plunge that happened to Southwestern Oregon. I mean, people in Portland, I think they pay like $14 per thousand. So when you're talking 56 cents or $1.11 per thousand, and you look at the quality of life and whether people are willing to move there and stay there and pay the rents that you have to pay to be there, there's got to be something to it. So that's my take on it.
I have a question for both of the candidates right along these lines. A lot of the taxation solutions I hear are really, like, in effect, going to adversely affect the poor and those who struggle to pay. I know that one of the big resistances to property taxes out in the outback here in Josephine County is that people are really seriously poor and unemployed. And even small raises in taxes threatens their land holding, which is all that they have. Why are the tax discussions always about general taxes on the population and not on raising corporate taxes? We just had
And that's what I'm talking about.
We had a big fight last year about education spending, and we were talking about $4 billion to, like, repair 20 or 30 years of failure to invest in our schools. And we got 2 of those billion. It was celebrated as a big victory, but what we ran into was a systematic refusal, frankly, on the part of corporate Democrats to even consider raising taxes on highly profitable corporations like Nike and Intel, who are home based here because they don't have to face taxes. But they certainly want a
It's
highly
really
skilled
out of
labor.
whack.
It's
No,
corporate
really out of
welfare.
whack. It's totally out of whack. And the thing about, there was a tax that was advanced on corporate sales in Oregon.
Yeah.
So there's an effect, a sales tax called the CAT. Are you familiar with that? Daniel, are you familiar with that tax?
No, I'm not familiar with the CAT.
Okay, well, that tax, I have to research it. I just became aware of it, that it started operating this year, I think, or next year. It was a tax that was imposed and then had a window of opportunity, I guess, for corporations to move away if they didn't want to pay it. But our opposition is really playing on this tax raise on corporations because it's really a tax on the people who are least able to pay, because they're going to pass along their the taxes to individuals, and that's going to increase the price of goods. Well, there's a real simple answer to that. Don't allow them to sell goods here if that's their behavior. We don't have to allow all corporations to exist in our state if the state has a solid interest that's counter to that behavior. But that's the only tax that corporations that I'm aware of that corporations actually are anticipating paying. And of course, they're not anticipating paying it. They're anticipating passing that cost of goods strictly over to their consumers. So
basically, those corporations are owned by stockholders, and the amount of taxes that they pay comes out of their enormous profits. They don't really have to increase the cost of the things that they produce because they don't actually produce anything. They import stuff and sell us our stuff.
Yeah. So I think that there's a really complicated answer to a really simple question, because the transition into an Oregon Green New Deal needs to be looking at the reestablishment of a really viable business structure in Oregon that encourages businesses to create themselves. And currently, we're not encouraging businesses to create themselves.
Yep.
So that is a real basic economic problem here. And I don't mean a problem from an outsider's point of view. As a citizen, this is a problem, because we should be seeing new businesses spring up that are not just businesses that resell something. We need to bring manufacturing home. And how to do that in a real way when we do have, when all of our, most of our, the goods that we would use to manufacture things from are shipped across the ocean, and they come back as totally almost unusable wood products. They're very poorly made.
And we need to get back to doing local.
Yes, we could do much better here. We don't have to talk big mills. We could talk small places. We could talk a place that just makes fence boards. Think about it. You know, hundreds of thousands of fence boards are shipped overseas as timber and come back as fence boards. Why? Why are we paying that huge cost of transportation and pollution? That's
because they pay 50 cents an hour to the people in Asia to do the work instead of paying union wages and insurance benefits.
That's the lie. Yeah, but that's the lie that they keep telling us. They keep telling us that they're shipping it overseas for the cheap labor, which of course happens. They're shipping it overseas for the cost of the fuel, for the transportation. You know, you have a truck big old truck, picks up all the logs, big old truck, puts lots of pollution in the air, but what is it doing with that pollution? It is purchasing fossil fuel. This is all a fossil fuel purchase system, so that the folks that are manufacturing get paid practically nothing to do it. That's a side benefit to the corporation. The corporation is actually making money for fossil fuel. The tanker that goes across the seas with the huge load of lumber, the tanker that comes back with all these manufactured goods, and the places that they go, the big trucks go, the harbors that take these things in, they're all using massive amounts of petroleum fuel. So if we don't get a handle on bringing that home so that we're selling more regionally than internationally, many of our goods could be sold very well regionally to the surrounding states, to the Western region states, to Canada, to Baja California, to Mexico and the West Coast. We could make a marketing and distribution and marketing system work here for our own agriculture, our own fishing, and all of those industries. We do not have to rely on petrochemicals. And what we're paying in the price of goods is petrochemical costs. It's not, in fact, the cost of labor. We could pay Oregonians
Cost of labor is part of global trade, but also the United States has had an interest in China in particular and East Asia more generally as an emerging market to consume our consumer goods since the late 19th century. That's why we took the Philippines in the Spanish-American War and demanded an open door policy while Europe was carving up China into spheres of influence markets. It was the beginning of American imperialism. And China, for all the bad stuff people want to say about it, has been lifting 100 million people a year out of poverty. And by poverty, I mean growing rice with oxen poverty. And those kids are going to college. They're getting apartments and houses. They have cell phones and cars. They have very modern lifestyles. And that's a 1.3 billion strong consumer market. So American corporations have always had an interest in having a presence there. And moving our jobs to those countries is sort of like a beachhead or a bulkhead to distributing goods there and making money off them, which is an age-old goal of American manufacturing capital. We thought that opening up the Chinese market was going to solve our cyclical depression problems in the late 1800s. So that's just the history addition to the conversation.
Thank you.
Labor as a cost to corporations is a big deal, and it's the first thing they want to cut. And that's why they do so much automation. And that's a part of the problem with going into the future is more automation means less useful humans. You don't need humans. So back in the 50s, I know we were going to have washers and dryers and dishwashers, and they were going to make our life so much easier. We were going to cut back on the work week. No, now you got to have 2 jobs. You don't get any more relaxed. You don't get to stay home. So that's another thing that we have to address as part of the future. Is it going to be Andrew Yang's idea? Because the fact of the matter is that humans are becoming less and less useful. And that's another reason that we have a lot of homeless people. And we have to figure out what to do about that in Oregon, where we have lots of rocks and we could build houses out of rocks. They don't cost much. We can build houses out of trees. We got some great sticks growing out there in the plantations. There's something that would make humans useful, because a feller buncher isn't going to go out there and put a house together. That requires human labor, human jobs. And then we have to talk about the apprenticeship jobs, the apprenticeship positions. We need people who know how to build things and how to fix things. And we need to have a pathway that ends up with some of those people making 6 figures, because it's a real pathway. And so that's something that I'm looking into with some of the people up in Salem, is somehow to power up our, what's that word? Power up our apprenticeship programs and keep real people in the real world.
And we're also having a challenge that's just beginning and is going to burgeon. You said something about Brookings being the ideal place to live. It was about 8 years ago. And that marketing was so successful, and also because the climate crisis, the climate change has not affected us as dramatically yet as it has the rest of Oregon. But partly because because of the way that the geography works here. But we have a huge number of climate refugees already in Brookings. And these are climate refugees that are moving with resources or without them, and everything in between. So we saw what happened with the settlements between Medford, not settlements, but the small towns between Medford and Ashland was horrible. The amount of homes that were damaged and done away with because the homes were not built. They were manufactured homes of various sorts. So we do manufactured homes in Oregon. We have a lot of manufactured homes placed here, but they're not fire resistant, and they are in places that depend on the influx of people over 50 in our area. So we have another issue with housing is that we have a lot of restricted housing places in our area which need to be broken up. In my opinion, restricted housing should be illegal in Oregon. We should not be able to say that only people over 50 live in a place, because 50 is a made up number. How many people do you know that are 50 that are really still vital, right? Well, most of them. They've got 17 to 19 years more left to work before they can even retire. So they've got a long time in their lives. And to have this kind of community, this is not a popular theory in my part of the country either. People think that you should be able to keep children and families out of a community. This is a very, very bad for community sustainability. Sustainability is a word that means many different things in the idea of a sustainable economy. One of them is we have a sustainable community, meaning we have people of all ages in it. And like Kat was saying, all different kinds of abilities, trained abilities, natural skills, and we have people who are interested in having the community thrive. Instead, on the coast, we have swaths of reasonable housing that people with families can't move into. That seems to me entirely unreasonable and unworkable. So we'll be looking at, these issues are not simple, and it's not going to be solved in the 2 years I get elected or the 4 years Kat does, because we need to move forward. We need to end the discussion at some point and do some action. And that's what I have a problem with our opposition about, is they are all about no action. They, in fact, are not about any new ideas. They are only about reaction. And the reaction to progressive goals is really deadly. So I'm hoping that we have, in fact, Kat and I and Jerry and all of the other folks that are thinking about doing their bit for helping our communities. I hope that we are moving as allies together in that effort, in trying to move, not just talk. So
We need some really strong left people to balance out the QAnons.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
That's scary.
They are scary, actually. All three of them in Brookings are scary.
We've got one of them running for what is it, Senate now?
Yep.
Jeez.
Jo Ray Perkins, the crazy lady who we didn't believe was really running. She just wanted people to send her money so she could buy a new car.
And even worse,
no, she accidentally won. And now what is she?
Even worse, in federal district 2, you might be Art Robinson might be your new senator.
Oh.
I mean, your new representative, excuse me, your new congressman. Art Robinson might be it. That would not
Art
be a
Robinson
good thing.
is Senate district, right?
Right, Senate district. No, Art Robinson too.
Yeah.
No, he's not Senate district. He's running for federal office in House of Representatives, CD2.
No, he used to do that.
Robinson's running for Oregon.
Yeah.
Alex Spencer is in CD2.
Okay.
Right. Alex Spencer's running against him, right?
No, Alex Spencer is running against somebody that I have no idea who it is. I don't
Oh,
care.
I thought she was running against Robinson. Anyway,
No.
Kurt Bentz,
Isn't it
Republican.
Bentz?
have I got the wrong race? I thought our Robinson was in CD2.
I
No,
thought he was running against Jerry
Robinson.
Allen.
Art
Isn't he
Robinson-
running against Jerry Allen?
You've got it, Jerry Allen. Hey,
Okay,
go
that's-
to
He's running
Joco.
HD2? Really?
The
Yeah,
Robinson
It's Senate
family
District
lives in
2.
Navy Junction,
Okay.
which
He's-
butts Senate District 1. So it would be Art Robinson versus Barry Allen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is an equal race with mine. It's a state.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
That's why I
Calla,
wanted you all to get on Jerry Allen's.
Sorry. Got mistaken about that. I've been fascinated by Art Robinson from a distance for several years. A distance is a good place to be fascinated by him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Considering his heavy investment in urine, I would agree.
His house
Calla,
almost
when you talk to
burned.
your neighbors, they'll tell them they did a great job of hiding how good the weather is in Brookings there. Because I grew up in Crescent City and I never heard a thing about the weather being so much better in Brookings than it is in Crescent City. But the word got out though when you see all those houses on the hills now. So
Well, I think real estate is really moving down there. I follow a couple of real estate agents, and it's like they list a house and by evening it's sold.
Yeah, it's a crazy real estate market right now because California burned up. You
Yeah.
know that the California fires, many hundreds of people are without homes.
Oh, there's
And
so
so-
many California license plates on the highways. So many
Mhm.
Californians up here.
Mhm.
Because their
Can't
homes
blame
The
them.
last 4 or 6 weeks, it was a visceral change. And it started with the fires, and it hasn't let up.
no.
Well, I just hope that they get registered here and they vote Democrat.
Well, the most of them are voting in California that we've met.
Yeah.
They've already,
Really?
they're voting, yes, because they don't have time, they don't trust that they have time to register here. And with our motor voter system, we have found a glitch in it, that when the motor voter system goes down and people are not at work, it gets very hard to get things done.
Yep, if you
Yeah.
can't get an appointment at the DMV.
Right, so,
Fill out the form for voter registration. I just delivered one today.
yes, of course they can, but, people coming from various places, they've got all kinds of systems where they came from. But we are also seeing influx of people from Arizona, a large number of Arizonans.
Yes,
We're
yes.
starting to see Texans and people where the weather has been really viciously horrible.
I
We're
saw
seeing
some
folks
of my
move here.
I saw some of my very first Florida license plates during the beginning of the fires.
Wow.
During the COVID, as Florida people were coming here, lots of them, and I had never seen a Florida license plate before.
Yeah, this is how we're going to get COVID in the outback. Is
Yep.
these huge influx of displaced, basically climate and plague refugees. I want to suggest that it may behoove the campaigns and even the parties where we do come across these people. You are allowed to vote anywhere in the country that you are. That is your right as an American citizen. You can only vote in one place, but we can help them fill out those voter registration forms and take them down to the county office for them. And that's going to be harder to do once the ballots drop, but because you have to be registered, 3 weeks before the election? But
I
those
think
people,
October the 17th. The ballots actually
October
drop
the
before
13th. It's
13th,
October the
okay.
13th.
the day before, because October 14th they drop, right?
Big sign on the wall here. That's the
I'm
only
wa-
reason I know that.
I'm always looking for the surprise vote, and that would be quite a surprise.
Well, it's very interesting to be out there in politics land right now because my experience is that the progressive grid is much broader across Oregon than I had thought. We've been working at trying to energize the progressive grid among Democrats here in this county since I hit the ground running in 2016. But I'm in touch with indivisibles from all over the state now and progressive organizations all over the state, some of them Democrats, some of them not. It's very interesting that there is a swell from the ground up toward progressive thought. And progressive thought simply means you make progress on things. You don't let them,
So bad about that.
right? What's bad about that? It's like, why? I'm an anti-fascist, aren't you? It's like, What's bad about that? It's an alternate reality situation. It's just, you find yourself talking with folks about, and you just say, how can you even think that? It doesn't make sense to me. But we'll see what happens. We hope we get a working government, and a working government would be a good thing. We have a lot of new folks running in Oregon. If you look across the Oregon races, for the state races, the legislature especially, it's a lot of good new faces, some good old faces, some people moving from the House to the Senate, they hope. We have many good environmentalists actually moving into being elected. So we think we can make progress on climate crisis response. We've wasted 3 years. So not wasted, we tried very hard to get it through. I don't mean to tell you that people weren't working on it. People were working on it very hard, but we were stymied, and it needs to not be stymied. We have to make some steps. The first steps that I'm going to do is see how if I'm elected, see how the legislature can support the executive order that begins the move in our agencies toward climate crisis response behaviors. So anyway.
Well, folks, I think we are nearing the end of our session. It's 8:21. Any
We
final?
really appreciate folks being here and having a chance to talk to you. You're a good team, like I said, for Southern Oregon here. You're really on the same wavelength here. So let's get you in there and get those young people out to vote, for Pete's sakes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
I do want to be sure that we ask for help for volunteers for our campaigns for phone banking.
Okay.
I think we sent out a request for the PCPs to see if they would work for us for each county. It's not restricted to who's in our districts, because when we make decisions at the state, we're making decisions for the whole state. So we're not excluding any source of volunteers at this time.
And Kat and I are not really asking for big money. Kat and I are not asking for big money. We're not taking PAC money, and I'm not taking any PAC money, even politically allied PAC money, such as unions sometimes donate. And I also did not seek endorsements, because it is a huge amount of energy involved in seeking endorsements, just that work. And
I want to tell you that I did not seek endorsements either. And I got, just out of the blue, the Consumer League, Oregon Consumer League endorsed me. It just fell out of the sky. And this is like 6 or 7 really smart people who really have a lot of influence on the elderly and the disabled. And it was just shocking
that's wonderful
that I got that. That was quite an honor.
So
your phone banks go district wide for your districts?
I'm not in need of phone bank help, so this would be for Kat. We each do need some small dollars into our campaigns at this point, because we're kind of raking up the leaves. We're trying to pay for signage, small, but Kat's district is twice as big as mine. Realistically, she has to travel twice as much. So we could use some small dollars, also influx into our campaigns, or if you prefer, donate to the county parties, because the county parties are also supporting our campaigns in the ways that are key to their success, which is outreach, which costs money, not for the volunteers, but for the materials. So we'd appreciate it if you want to do small money donations at this time, but you consider local candidates rather than national candidates, because small donations to national candidates at this point in the election cycle are not going to turn the corner for them at all. And for us, what it'll mean is that we end out in the black. We're not hyper financed by anybody.
Thank you very much, folks.
Okay.
And
Really
we'll
good.
see you again soon, hopefully.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
great to see you all.
Okay.
Very
Very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.